What is up, YouTube? Today I've got 5 reasons why I think people might be failing the Istructe exam. I plan on sitting the exam myself in January 2024, and I note that it hasn't got the highest pass rate, so I've just been trying to dig around myself in a hope that I can avoid failing this exam. So I just wanted to share what I've learnt to date. So up first, I've just going to run through a past paper here. So we've got the 2021 question 1. It's a residential building with a basement car park. So if you've done any research into past papers, you'd see there's a bit of a pattern in terms of how the questions are presented. And section 1, part A, pretty much always asks to provide 2 distinct and viable solutions. So the first area or point where I reckon people might be losing marks, which is leading them to fail the exam, is that they're really only presenting one distinct and viable solution. So if you have one solution and then you're pretty much just switching concrete to steel, you're just substituting a material, that's not enough to make that other solution distinct. If you're just playing around with some grid lines and spacing of some of the elements, that wouldn't be considered enough to make that second solution distinct. So if you've thought of one good solution and you do some really minor changes, you're not really making it distinct, and you're probably losing a lot of marks on the table. And on top of that, it needs to be viable as well. So as you're probably aware, you have to recommend one, and you're only going to go through in section 2 and give sort of some detailed calcs for one of these solutions. So you're naturally, and as you should, you're going to suggest a solution that you're more comfortable designing, you've probably got more experience with, and you might think that means you should provide one solution that's just like far superior than the other. So that way you end up sort of, suggesting, solution A is so much better for XYZ, and it shits all over the other one. But if your other one, you haven't really been able to sort of give any good reasons as to why you're presenting it to the client, it doesn't really come across as a viable solution, and you're going to be losing marks there. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that your second solution is distinct, and make sure that it's a good solution. It's got some pros for it as well. So that was the first one. When you've got 2 concepts, make sure they're distinct, make sure they're viable. The second reason that I've got here is I think people might be struggling to demonstrate the lateral stabilities of their system. So what I would say here is in section 1, just do a sketch and clearly show to justify and satisfy yourself, as well as whoever's picking up and marking this, that you clearly understand the lateral load path, and each of your systems have suitable, safe lateral stability systems. So that's the second one. Again, kind of falls under section 1, just making sure that your system has a suitable lateral stability system. Now, I had a crack at this one here, so I'm just going to share sort of what my concept looked like to discuss point number 3. And point number 3 is doing sort of like repetitive, unnecessary calculations. So I'm talking about section 2 now, when you actually are being asked to profess sufficient design calculations. And so one of my concepts for this building here was a PT beam. PT slab with band beams, and what I would do in this instance, I would design a typical sort of like slab, and then I'd design one of the beams. Now I wouldn't say I've got like 24 beams on a single floor plate here. I wouldn't go and produce 24 different calcs for each individual beam on my floor plate. I would be identifying the critical one and having literally like one A4 page that details a band beam, and I'd do that well, and I'd clearly show why it's the critical one. But then I'd move on to the other critical elements that we need to go, because you really want to be showing to the examiner that you know how to design a band beam. It's part of your solution. But if you go and produce just countless pages of different, like, varying sizes of band beams, you're going to start losing marks, and you're probably going to start running out of time for the other critical elements. Say for this building, you wouldn't want to be missing out on, say, like the basement design. It's literally in the title of the heading. So I guess my point 3 is just doing sort of like repetitive calcs that aren't necessary. Point number 4 is around the foundations. So when I say the foundations, I think that there's 2 things. People might be focusing on the superstructure itself and just missing out the foundation altogether if they're running out of time. So yeah, if you miss out the foundation altogether, you're missing the foundation of your building, and you're probably failing, or you're definitely losing a lot of marks there. But on top of that, if you're putting in a foundation, it has to be a suitable foundation for the ground conditions provided and the geometry of the building that you're designing. So for this concept here, I had CFA piles going down into the bedrock, can't remember, but essentially what I'm saying is make sure you don't ignore the foundation, and make sure that the foundation is suitable for the ground conditions that they've provided and the geometry of the building. And my last one, so that was number 4, the making sure you've got the foundations. And my last point that I've got here is making sure that your sort of responses to the later parts of section 2 and 1. So for instance here, section 2 asks to provide a detailed method statement for the safe construction of the building. If you just talk about sort of generic things, which would include things that, put up a site fence and get your site crib, that could be said about any construction site in the world. I'm not saying ignore it, but you want to be tailoring your responses to the individual requirements of the site that you've been given. So, for example, here, you'd want to really be illustrating your understanding that your site condition, which they've given you here, is in a city centre location. So some extra thought's going to have to be given around that, and demonstrated in your method statement about sort of like site access, because that's obviously going to be really different to an industrial building sort of out in the sticks. So yeah, making sure that you don't skim read over the finer details here. It's not just text filler. You want to be showing your understanding that your solution is tailored to the requirements of the project given. So just to recap what we had there, we've got in section 1, we making sure that we got 2 distinct and viable solutions, as we discussed. Number 2 is demonstrating that we got lateral stability in our systems, and I think that's done with a clear sketch and a description. This is the lateral stability of scheme A. Boom, sketch, description. And scheme 2, this is a little sketch showing this is lateral stability of this scheme, and then a little description. Number 3, we had, moving on to like section 2, is doing like too many repetitive calcs. Pick up the critical element of your foundation, beam, column, any roof elements. If you have to design a transfer element or any cantilevering elements, just pick your critical elements and design one of them and move on. Obviously your lateral stability elements fall under that as well. And number 4 was making sure that you design your foundations, like A, don't miss them, and B, make sure you're choosing the suitable foundation. And then number 5 was don't come in with what feels like sort of pre-prepared generic responses to these questions here in the later sections of 1 and 2. Make sure you're really tailoring them to the question provided. So that's it. There were the 5 reasons that I feel people might be slipping up in these exams. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you disagreed, let me know in the comments. Thank you.